Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Chullin Daf Ayin Hey, and we're starting about three-fourths of the way down on Ayin Daled Amud Beis, about 4 lines before the wide lines. Yesterday in the Mishnah, a Mishnah that started on the bottom of Ayin Daled Amud Aleph, we learned about a fascinating machlokes Tanoim that hovered around whether or not there really is in fact a din of ben pakua. Of course, if a mother is shechted and there is a fetus in utero, and that fetus survives, so does that child require shchita? We saw a three-way machlokes tanoim. We saw the opinion of Rav Meir that really there is no din of ben pakua, and really this fetus, even though its mother was shechted while the fetus was still connected, the fetus that became a child needs its own shchita. We saw the shita of the chachamim that it does not require shchita, and then we saw the shita of Rav Shimon Shizuri that even if it was 5 years old, it wouldn't require shchita. Of course, we're going to ask on those last two shitas because they're very similar. We're going to see a couple of questions that, as we always do in Shas, that kind of pushes the limits and tries to help us to clarify what the scope and breadth of these halachos are. Let's get started. Ibayaluhu. We have a question that was asked in the Beis Medrash Gemara that we'll soon see in Maseches Bechoros as well. Mahu liftos biben pakua. As you know, there is a pasuk that says Peter Chamor Tifte Beseh, that when it comes to a Peter Chamor, a firstborn donkey, we are Tifte Beseh. But what if the seh that we were dealing with as a pidyon for the chamor was a ben pakua seh? Would that work? Yes or no? So says the Gemara. Aliba de Reb Meir lo tibaylach. This is not even a shaila according to Reb Meir, because what does Reb Meir hold about ben pakua famously? To kevan de Omar, that in regards to a ben pakua that ta'un shchita, since a ben pakua, even though, I mean, that's the nature of a ben pakua, it was still attached to its mother through an umbilical cord, even though the mother was shechted while it was connected. Reb Meir holds that the ben pakua requires shchita. If that's true, then of course this animal can be used as peter chamor tifte beseh. Why? Se me'al yahu. Because since he holds that ben pakua is really not a din, he doesn't hold a ben pakua, it's just a regular se, and of course it can be used. So this question of the Gemara from Bechoros is really not a question at all, according to Rav Meir. Kiti bailach, last of the short lines on Ayin Daled Amud Beis. Kiti bailach aliba derabana. The only time this question of whether or not we can use a se, that is a ben pakua, the only time we are able to ask our question even is according to the Rabbanan. Amre, what did the Rabbanan hold in regards to a ben pakua? Shchitas imo metaharto. They hold that when the fetus is still attached to the mother and the mother is shechted, that animal is a ben pakua in the language of the Gemara. Shchitas imo metaharto. That the shchita of the mother is metaher the animal. So according to him, according to he who holds that there is a din of ben pakua, so then is a seh that is a ben pakua usable for peter chamor tifde beseh? Can that seh be a ben pakua? So says the Gemara, let's clarify hakira. Do we say first to the long lines? Kevan de amre shchitas ima mitaharto, because we say that when the mother was shechted, so therefore it's as though the child was shechted, then how do we view this animal even when it walks around? As it relates to the purposes of Peter Chamor Tifte Beseh, then it might be Kibisar Bidikulahu. It's like, you go to Jewel Mariano's, you go to Sarah's Tent Hungarian, the meat's in the package already. That set cannot be used to be posed at the Peter Chamor. Why? Because it's been shechted already, halachically speaking. That animal can be killed with a knife. We don't care at that point. You can stab it, you can shoot it with an arrow, you can do nechira, you can do whatever you want. So do we say, again, within the Rabbanan who hold that there is a din of ben pakua, do we say that a ben pakua is kibisar bidikulahu? O Dilma, do we say that no, this animal, even though you're right that halachically it doesn't require shchita because shchitas imo metaharto, but kevan to right v'azil v'reit v'asi, since this animal is running around, go look at it. What does it look like? A sheep running around. Therefore, se karina be. It has a din of a se. And because it has a din of a seh, therefore it can be used for peter chamor. So this is actually the question, only according to the Rabbanan. Do we allow a seh that is a ben pakua to be used as the seh for the peter chamor, yes or no? The Gemara says this is a machlokes amorayin. 3 lines into the wide lines, 2 lines into the wide lines. Mar Zutra Amar Ein Podin. According to Mar Zutra, he says Ein Podin, you're not allowed to use a seh that is a ben pakua for these purposes. Rav Ashi Amar Podin. Rav Ashi Amar, he says absolutely you are. Amar le Rav Ashi lemar Zutra. Rav Ashi, who says you're allowed to use the seh, says to Mar Zutra, who says you're not. My daitach. I don't understand your opinion. Why can't you use this seh? Is that because the gamris you learn out the gzeira shava of seh semi psachim, and just like by psachim, we have limitations on what kind of animals we can use. So too over here by Peter Chamor we have a limit. Imalahalan by Korban Pesach is Zachar Tamumu Ben Shana. Maybe we should say Afkan Zachar Tamumu Ben Shana. How do you know what to learn and what not to learn? If you're relying on the gzeira shava of seh to teach us that there are limits of this chamor tifteh b'seh, then maybe we should also assume that when we do the peter chamor tifteh b'seh, that the seh by peter chamor has the same other dinim of a korban pesach, which is that it has to be zachar tamim, it has to be ben shana. We should say the same thing over here. So says the Gemara, tifteh riba. The Gemara responds that no, tifteh riba. What does that teach us? That therefore the seh can even be female. It doesn't have to be a zachar. That we do allow by the peter chamor that it can even be a female. So says the Gemara, tifteh. If in fact we have a drasha of tifteh, then afilu komilinami. How do you? These drashas are so difficult. Once you say that tifteh is inclusive enough, like that peter chamor tifteh b'seh. So once we have that word, and you're telling me that I know that by psachim it has to be a zachar, but tifteh is a ribui that teaches me that by peter chamor it can even be a female. Fine, but then why don't we say kol milinami? Why don't we say that even a ben pakua can be that way, Mar Zotra? So the Gemara responds, Im Kain, 10 lines from the bottom on Ayin Dalet Amud Beis. Im Kain, seh my ahani. There would be no use for the drush of seh because we learn everything from tifteh. Therefore, the Gemara says, when we say tifteh, there are limits to what tifteh includes. And therefore, what we say is that tifteh is a ribui, that even though by psachim it has to be zachar tamim, but when it comes to peter chamor tifteh b'seh, we allow for even a female. What about ben pakua? Maybe we should allow a ben pakua to be included in regards to our case of peter chamor tifteh b'seh. Says the Gemara, no, we're not allowed to do that. So here we see, again, pressure testing. That's always what the Gemara does, so we can end up with clarity in halacha. All of the unique cases of the Gemara, all the pressures of the Gemara are to teach us exactly that point. That was question 1, asked and answered, or at least both of the shitas were able to stand up to the test here. That is Mar Zutra saying Ein Podin, that you're not allowed to use a ben pakua seh for peter chamor, and according to Rav Ashi, you are. The Gemara asks another question, trying to figure out the relationship between the fetus and the mother. Mahu limnos bo rishon v'sheni. How do we view the relationship between the fetus and the mother? If the mother becomes a rishon, does the fetus become a sheni? Or no, are they treated the same? So here too, we have a machlokes amorayin. Rav Yochanan amar monin bo rishon v'sheni. Yeah, they do interact with each other that way. In other words, they're separate entities. And Reb Shimon ben Lakish amar ein monin bo rishon v'sheni. Of course not. They're connected. They're all one of the same. And says the Gemara a mashal as to how we should view the relationship between the mother, the aim, and the fetus. Nase ke'egos hamiskashkesh b'klipaso. It's like having, just imagine a pistachio, a pistachio shell, but the nut on the inside is loose, which is very rare. I don't really know how many times I've seen that. But if you shake it, it's mikashkesh, and it makes a sound. So says the Gemara, are you going to tell me that the nut on the inside is separate from the shell? No, they're one and the same. That is exactly why Reish Lakish is of the opinion that there is no Rishon V'Sheni. We're not Monin Rishon V'Sheni when it comes to a mother and the fetus. Says the Gemara, hang on one second. Eisvei Reb Shimon ben Lakish le Rav Yochanan. Reish Lakish, who holds Ein Monin Bo Rishon V'Sheni, that a fetus can't impact the mother can't impact the fetus, whatever the halacha is by one, it is by the other. Wait 1 second. We have a brisa, the brisa we've seen already. Habasar magen avela divrei Reb Meir, according to Reb Meir, and this really began these party lines that we've been seeing over the last 10 blot, a little bit less than that actually, a handful of blot, that according to Reb Meir, the basar is magen avela. Remember what we were talking about over there, that the leg can be metame the fetus. That's the Reb Meir. The Chachamim Omer, no, it's not. It's maget treifa shchuta. It's not a nevela to treifa. So says the Gemara as follows. Reish Lakish wants to argue as follows. Bishlama ledidi. It makes sense according to me, says Reish Lakish, that he's ein monin bo rishon v'sheni. That the relationship between the aim and the fetus is that they don't go from sheni to rishon and rishon, from rishon to sheni and sheni to shlishi. Because by me, says Reish Lakish, delmina chad gufahu hainu de'iskasher bedama de'ime. Because it was mukhshar with its mother's blood, it's all the same. So whatever happens to the mother instantly happens to the child. Ela ledidcha, but according to you, Rav Yochanan, that we do hold monin rishon l'sheni, b'mai is kasher. How did the tumah transfer? So Amar Lei, Rav Yochanan says back, terrible argument. Really, the way that the tumah would transfer is b'shchita, because once shchita happens, the tumah transfers even without a liquid, and that is the shita of Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon is of the opinion that even without liquid, shchita alone creates for tumah. The Gemara now flips the script on Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish asked on Rav Yochanan. Now Rav Yochanan is going to ask on Reish Lakish. 3 lines from the bottom on Ayin Daled Amud Beis. Eisvei Rav Yochanan the Reish Lakish. Avar ben Nahar Huchshar. If an animal walks through a river, now that it's wet with one of the 7 liquids, which is mayim, so says the Gemara, Huchshar. Now it's susceptible to tumah. Halach lebeis hakvaros. If the animal walked into a cemetery, so then nitma, then automatically it becomes tumah. Tumas mace functions differently than other types of tumah, than tumas ochel. Bishlama ledidi, says Rav Yochanan, de amina tre gufein, who I hold that the mother and the fetus are really 2 separate entities. Mishum hachi huchshar in, lo huchshar lo. That's why we need huchshar. Because without huchshar, there's no way for the tumah to transfer from the aim to the fetus or from the fetus to the aim. Elo ledidcha, according to you, Reish Lakish, to amris chad gufahu. Remember, you compared it to the egos hamakashkesh, amiskashkesh beklipa. So according to you that they're one, haiskasher bedama deime. Why didn't you say that they were connected by the blood of the mother? So says the Gemara on the top of Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. Dogs the Gemara b'shchita yabeshta. We were talking about a unique case where there was no significant blood in the shchita, and therefore, udelo Reb Shimon, not like the opinion of Reb Shimon, playing off of the comment from earlier. Reb Shimon holds that you do need liquid in order to transfer tumah. Here, there was no liquid, and even not like Reb Shimon. So that's how Reish Lakish would answer up. Now the Gemara picks this apart still more. Man Tana, who is the Tana who holds that Avar benahar huchshar, halach beveis hakvaros nitma? Who is the one who holds like the brisa that we saw from the bottom of the page on Ayin Daled Amud Beis, and really its source is from a couple of blot ago on Ayin Beis Amud Aleph? Who is the shita that holds that way, that if an animal walks through a river, it becomes mukhshar l'tuma, and if it walks through a beis hakvaros, it becomes tameh without? Amar Rav Yochanan, who is that? The Tana is Rabbi Yossi Haglilihi. The Tanya, we have a brisa, a tosefta over here in this parak. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Mishum Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Mitame Tumas Ochlin V'tzarach Hechsher, black on white. We see that there needs to be a liquid to transfer tuma. And this should say, V'Rebbi Omer. If you look on the side, on the Hagos V'Tzionim, in the actual tosefta, it says Rebbi Omer, so not Chachamim. So Rabbi Yossi said we need liquid to create Hechsher Tuma. Rebbe Omer, Eino mitame tumas ochlen mipnei shuchai. There is no transference of tuma when things are alive. V'kol shuchai, Eino mitame tumas ochlen. This is the sheet of Rebbe, and it is found in other places in halacha. And ve'azda Rav Yochanan l'taime. Rav Yochanan is following his own shita. Rav Yochanan was of the opinion. Remember, the Rav Yochanan we're talking about is on the third line. We're on the 10th line. Rav Yochanan on the third line said that the brisa from Ayin Beis and Aleph that Avar Benar Hukshar Halach Bevesa Kvaros Nitma. He says it's like Rav Yossi Aglili. And now Rav Yochanan is like his own reasoning. How do we know? Rav Yochanan. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Beis Shammai Amru Davar Echad. Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Beis Shammai agree to the same exact opinion. What is it that they agree to? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Hade Amran. We saw the Shita above that we need a Hechsher Tuma between the two entities. That's Rabbi Yossi Aglili from the Tosefta right above us. And Beis Shammai, what's his Shita? Ditnan, we have a Mishnah from Uktzin, Dagim. When we talk about fish, we know that things that are alive don't typically transfer tuma. So says the Gemara, when is it that a fish is considered to be dead enough that it does transfer tuma? So Beis Shammai omrim mishe yatsudu. Once they're caught, they're done for. Says the Gemara, says Rashi, Rashi's a third of the way down. Dibra hamaskel mishe yatsudu. Dekev an de'ein tu'unin shchita. Hare hein kimesim. Wow. Fascinating. If I catch a fish and it's catch and release, it's not a mace. The fish is considered alive. If I catch the fish, even if I keep it in the water and it's on a line and it's in a net and it's in some kind of scenario where it's kind of trapped in an enclosed space and I'm planning to eat it, now it's susceptible to tuma. According to Beis Shammai, that is the susceptibility of tuma. Ubeis Hillel omer mishayamusu. What kind of games are you playing? When it's dead, it's dead. If it's not dead, it's not dead. Rabbi Akiva omer misha she'ein yecholin lichios. From the time that it can no longer live. That sounds a little bit similar to the previous shita. The shita of Beis Hillel was mishayamusu, and the shita of Rabbi Akiva was misha she'ein yecholin lichios. So my benaihu. What's the difference between the shita of Rabbi Akiva, who says Misha she'en yecholin lichios, and Beis Hillel, who says that a fish can become susceptible to tuma mishayamusu? So says the Gemara, a third of the way down. Rabbi Yochanan, dag mekartea ika beinaihu. When there's a dog, that is flopping around, Rashi mekartea mefarper. It's flopping around. You've seen the pictures on the boat. Ukegon she yibesh bo kisela ubein snapirav, where it dries out under the scales at the size of a sela, disu lochai kidamrina b'maseches tainis. So now, if you tie all of that back into the Mishnah and Uktzin, we have three shitas. We have the shita of Beis Shammai, that it is when they are still alive, but it's mishe yatsudu. We have the shita of Beis Hillel, mishe yamusu, when they're actually dead. And we have the shita of Rabbi Akiva, that they are going to be considered dead once they've dried out just a little bit. Uktzin. What? Rashi. Does my Rashi? Yeah. It says b'maseches tainis with an asterisk, and it said midfus something adfus vilna b'maseches Shabbos daf kuv zayin ubeis. How did you know one way or the other? Did I read tainis? Oh, that's so funny. It's been corrected. It appears your version might be the right one. This says from an early Dfus that's referred to as Aleph Mem Dalid. I don't know what that means. Ad Dfus Vilna, up until Dfus Vilna, b'Maseches Shabbos Daf Kuv Zayin Amud Beis. So I don't know which one's right. It could be that was when we found out the mistake. Yeah. I don't know which way it is. I didn't even know I read that part of that. Okay, fine. So that's what the Gemara says. Fine. Let's dig in a little bit to a sugya about dagim. Boy Rav Chizda, noldu bedagim simone treifa mahu. How do we treat simone treifa in a fish? On the one hand, they're not subject to shchita, so they don't have the regular rules of behema. But at the same time, they're an animal that we will eat. Well, some people will. So how do we treat that? Tiboy lemanda omar treifa chaya. This is true according to the shita that a treifa is not necessarily an animal that's going to die. But tiboy lemanda omar treifa enachaya. This is also true according to the opinion that a treifa, by definition, will die in the next 12 months. According to the shita that says that a treifa doesn't necessarily die. So why is this question about noldu bedagim simane treifa a question? Because behemahu denefisha chiyusa, when we talk about a large cow, it has a lot of life to it. In other words, it's not so simple to kill a cow. Cow tipping doesn't kill cows. Shooting them doesn't even always kill them. They're very tolerant animals. So by them, we would say that when a cow is a treifa, it can still be a chaya. Aval dagim, but when it comes to fish, dilona fisha chiyusaihu lo. But fish, they don't have a lot of chiyus to them. In other words, they're easy to kill. If I pull a fish in on the line, within 3 minutes, that thing is dead if I don't put it back in the water. No different than a human that's in the water too long. If the fish is out of the water too long, they're a done deal. So says the Gemara that according to the Shita that we say that a treifa is chaya, maybe that's only a treifa is chaya by big animals, but by fish we wouldn't say that. Oh, Dilma. Or perhaps afilu l'man amar treifa eina chaya. Maybe we'd say even according to the opinion that a treifa doesn't live, hani mili behema, de yesh b'mina shchita. Maybe that's only true where we would say that a treifa is eina chaya, that by definition, if an animal has a treifa, that it will die. Maybe we only say that in regards to animals like a behema where there's a din of treifa. Aval dagim de'ein b'minan shchita lo. So we really don't know the answer to this teku. We're not sure if there's a din of treifos by fish. That's very surprising to me. I don't know. I would have thought there were some inherent psulim. Okay, next. Rahman al-Litzlan hitila nefel. If someone delivers a stillborn of an animal, Rav Yochanan Amar felbo kechelev behema. So again, you have a cow. The cow delivers a stillborn. And how do we view the chelev of that stillborn? We know in the parent, the chelev is very problematic. It's an isur kares to eat the chelev on the klayos and on the kaved. So says the Gemara, how do we treat it? Rav Yochanan Amar, chelbo of the stillborn is kechelev behema, and therefore you're chayiv kares. The Reb Shimon ben Lakish Amar, no, chelbo kechelev chaya. Really, it's like a wild animal. And in a wild animal, what's the din by its chelev? It's completely mutter. Now, just to be clear, in our case, it's not like Reb Shimon ben Lakish is saying you can eat the chelev off of a stillborn. It's usher because the animal's nevela or treif or whatever the status is, probably a nevela. It's usher to eat, but it's not chayav kares. So this is the machlokes. If a cow is hitila nefel, a cow delivers a stillborn. We know that in the parent and the mother, if you eat the chelev, it's going to be a chiyuv kares. What about the stillborn? Machlokes amoraim. Do we say that it's chayiv kares just like the mother, or do we say no, that while afal pikein that it's usher because you're not allowed to eat a stillborn, obviously no shchita, and it died of its own accord. Even though that's true, that you can't eat it, but at least it's not going to be a chiyuv kares. Rabbi Yochanan Amar. This is a fascinating chakira machlokes here. We're halfway down on Ayin Hamida. Rabbi Yochanan Amar chelbo kechelev behema. Why is it that the chelev of the ubar is going to be kechelev behema and chayiv kares? Because avira garam, just being brought into the air of the world, transforms the ubar into a behema, and therefore, even though it's not alive, the chelev has a din of being part of a behema and your chayiv kares. Reb Shimon ben Lakish Amar no, that chelbo kechelev chaya, because chodashim garmi. What causes the animal to become a behema? Gestation. Chodashim. 9 months. Whatever, I think we've been discussing in the Gemara, Davar Pasha, that it's 9 months. Is that? No idea. I have no idea. I'm just going with the flow here. But I assume that the gestational period for a cow is 9 months. But all that said, the Gemara says that Reish Lakish says, by definition, if you have a cow that has a stillborn, it means that it was born early. And therefore, it's not a behema, and therefore the chelev that's in that animal is kechaya, and it's not a chiyuv kares. So says the Gemara. And Ika de Amre, there are those who say otherwise. What'd you find? Anything? About 9 months. Fascinating, no?
It is fascinating. Think about 283 days, according to
What is that? 300 days, yeah.
roughly 9 months.
Almost to the day. 9 months and 13 days, yeah. Be'erach. Ika de Amri, that was one version of the machlokas. However, 2/3 of the way down, we see on Ayin Ham and Aleph another version of the machlokas. Kol hecha de lo kalulo chadashav lo klumi. No. If an animal doesn't fill its gestational period, of course it's not going to be considered a behema, and of course the chaylev of the ubar of the stillborn would be like a chaya and not an iser kares. Ki pligi hecha de hoshit yado lemei behema. Really, what we're talking about is where one inserted their hands into the uterus. The talash chaylev shel ben teschai ve'achal. A bit of a serial killer, if we're going to say, but this is what he... Quite a skilled butcher, not the kind of guy you would want to have on the other side of the table. So says the Gemara that what is the machlokas here? If somebody went into the uterus and managed to remove the chaylev of the ubar and it's ben tes, it is kalulo chadashav. It is. Do we say there that the chaylev is like a behema, or not? And here you already can see what the machlokas is going to be. Rav Yochanan amar chelbo kechaylev behema because chodashim garmi. Guess what? It's ben tes. I don't care where the animal is, in the uterus, not in the uterus, in the avir ha'olam or not. Ben tes is ben tes is ben tes, and the chaylev is going to have a din of a behema, and guess what? You're chayiv kares. However, Reb Shimon ben Lakish Amar, no, chelbo kechelev chaya. Why? Chodashim ve'avira garmi. I agree, you need 9 months, but if it's still in utero, it's an aver of the cow. It's not its own behema. It's like eating the chelev off the leg. Of course, that's not the chelev that's going to be usher. So very drastically different. I mean, the principles are the same, but their shitas completely flip. Rav Yochanan was the one who spoke about Avira in the first example, and Rav Yochanan is now the one who talks about Chodashim. So anyways, these are the two versions of the Machlokas. Now let's ask some questions on this second version. Eisvei Rav Yochanan the Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Ma chelevu shtei klayos amuros be'asham. When we talk about the fats that are on the shtei klayos, on the kidneys and on the... lost my place. The chelev ushtei klayos ha'amuros ba'asham, in regards to the asham, motza mechlal shlil. So this is a fascinating thing. It's a conceptual argument because the asham is male, so the asham doesn't have a shlil. But the concept is that if by an asham we have this rule that the principles don't fall down to the shlil, then afkol motza mechlal shlil, then any fetus should not have to worry about the principles of the parent. And therefore, says the Gemara, says Rav Yochanan to Reish Lakish, bishlamad l'didi, I could understand according to me, because I say that chodashim are garmi, the months matter, hainu de'itzrich kra lemeute, that's why we have chelev ushtei klayos, to tell me that the halacha is different by korbanos. Elo l'didcha, amai itzrich, what's the point of the psukim? So what does Reish Lakish say? Amar le, taima didi nami mehacha. I also learn it out from there. I learn my halacha from there. Nothing different than you. I learn that that the halacha is by korbanos, is that it's different. But I'm not talking about korbanos, so we're good to go. The Amre, the exact flip. Eisvei Reb Shimon ben Lakish to Reb Yochanan. Machil v'shtei kletzim ers b'asha motz mechlal shlil. Avka motz mechlal shlil. Same brisa. Bishlamad l'didi, says Reish Lakish. Mishum hachi mi'atarachmana. I understand why the Torah had to make an exclusion because of how I hold, which is that he held that chodashim and avira are garmi. Ela ledidcha likarev. According to you, we should obligate a requirement of shchita on this chelev. Says the Gemara, no. Amar le midei dehave amachusar zman. This is a bit of a new kimta for Rav Yochanan to wriggle out of this. No. We're talking about an animal that's less than 8 days old. That's machusar zman. All right. So, anyways, they both withstand the test of the questions. Says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom of Ayin Hamad Aleph. Amar Rabbi Ami, Hashochet hasat treifa. Let's say that a person is doing shchita, and the animal has one of the many treifas that we learned about in the previous prakim. Umatza ba ben teschai. So I shech the parent. when I start dissecting the animal after shchita, guess what? I find a moving, living calf on the inside of the cow. So put on your thinking caps. L'divrei ha'oser, according to the ones who say that this animal is a regular animal, which is Rav Meir, matir. Okay, it's a lamdisha thing here. According to Rav Meir, who holds that a ben pakua is a regular animal and it requires its own shchita, that means that the ubar is different than the parent, and therefore, even though the parent is a treifa, the kid is not necessarily a treifa. So he's matir because of the same yesod that Rav Meir holds stark. That what? That he holds that the ubar is different than the aim. And therefore, by ben pakua it requires shchita, and therefore by treifa it's not necessarily the same as his mother. And the divrei hamatir, according to the chachamim who say that the ben pakua is like its mother, then guess what? Oser. Then he says that it's also a treifa like its mother. Oh. However, Rava pushes back on this sheet of Rav Ami. Rava Amar ledivrei hamatir nami mutter. Even according to the shita of the chachamim who hold that a ben pakua is pater from shchita, they still would say that it's lav dafka, that just because the mother's a treifa, so too the son is a treifa. Why would he hold that way? Because dalit simanim achsher rachmana. There's two different ways to shecht this animal. One way to shecht the animal is by shechting the mother. Remember, we're in the camp of the chachamim. We're not in the camp. We're not in the camp of Rav Meir. We're in the camp of the chachamim. So you can either shecht the two simanim of the mother, or you can shecht the two simanim of the son. Last line on Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. Amar Rav Chizda hashochet es hatreifa umatzaba ben teschai. Same exact case. That if I were to shecht an animal that was a treifa, the mother, and then I see an animal wriggling inside, and I know that there's an animal that's in there that's alive, and I find out that it's kalulo chadashab, it's a ben tes, and it's perfectly alive and well. So turning to the top of Ayin Hamid Beis, ta'un shchita, according to this approach, you do need to do shchita. In other words, he doesn't hold a ben pakua. B'chai bizra'ul chayayim v'hakeba. In general, with shchita, even non-kachim shchita, we had to give the kohanim some food. This was their sustenance. It was a little tax that we paid. We gave them these three body parts. Now, that's one approach. And v'im meis, if in fact the animal dies without shchita, as Rashi points out, tahor milatame, remove the word b'masa, tahor milatame, then if it dies that way, then it is, then the ubar is tahor. Amar le Rabba. I don't understand the line that you just said. The two halves of your sentence of ta'un shchita and v'imeis tahar milatame are a stira mineube. Ta'un shchita keman. According to who do you say that you must hold shchita? If you're saying that the shchita was done and the top two words are ta'un shchita for the ubar, then what? Obviously, you're a Rav Meir Jew, Rav Meir, who holds that a ben pakua is a zero. And if you shech the mother, that solves no problems. You're going to then be obligated to shech it again. So the first phrase of Rav Chizda is that you're ta'un shchita for a ben pakua. That's Rav Meir Torah. The imeis tahor milatame b'masa. Also, again, b'masa shouldn't be there. And if the animal dies on its own, what about the ubar? It's tahor kiman. Who is that shita like? That's kirabanan. So the maisa, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. So says the Gemara, according to you, we should have the same exact question with Reb Chia, because he presents a very, very similar scenario. We're on Ayin Hey Amud Beis, 4 lines down. What did we see by Reb Meir in the Brisa? This is actually a Tosefta here in this Masechta. Says the Gemara as follows: Hadatani Reb Chia, Hashochet es hatreifa. Let's say that I do shchita on Betsy the cow, and Betsy is a treifa, and after the shchito matzaba ben teschai, and then I find an animal that's kalulo chadashav. It is full gestational period. It is a totally normal animal in that way. Ta'un shchita v'chai b'zro v'hal chayam v'akeba. Same din as Rav Chizda, and then he also says the same conflicting din that Rav Chizda said v'meis tar milatame b'masa. So says the Gemara, the same exact question that Rabbah asked against Rav Chizda, the Gemara, Rav Chizda is going to push and say, what about Rav Chia? I have a beautiful Marimakum in Rav Chia. Rav Chia says exactly what I say, that if you shech the mother and you find the aim, it's ta'on shchita. If it dies, it's tahor milatame. So says the Gemara, let's analyze Reb Chia in the same way we analyze Reb Chizda. 8 lines down. Ta'on shchita kiman ki Reb Meir. That's a Reb Meir Jew. If you're saying after the mother shechted that you have to shech the ben pakua, you obviously hold like Reb Meir. V'imeis tahor milatame b'masa ki Rabbanan. Literally word for word. Says the Gemara, it can't be that Rav Chizda didn't know about this. That's not possible. So therefore, halo kasha. The shita of Rav Chia is not a problem. Rav Chia im kvar mitzah omeis ka'amar. In the case of Rav Chia, we were talking about where the ubar was found dead. Ela lididcha Rav Chizda kasha. So what does Rav Chizda say back to this? Amar le lididinami lo kasha. I disagree with you. Dalid simonim achsher beirachmana. He says there's always a possibility of Dalid Simanim Achsher Rabbanon. Really, the first part of the din is not like Reb Chia, is not like Reb Meir. Really, he's a Rabbanon Jew. Rashi here points this out. Rashi is about 12 lines down. Dibur Hamaschel Dalid Simanim. V'kula Rabbanon, Kirabbanon. But umodu Rabbanon di imbada shochto shochet umoelo. V'lo amar shachud v'omedu. They still say that shchita helps to kill the child. You can either do the parent or you can do the child. Both of them are viable options. Says the Gemara, Kisalik Reb Zera, when Reb Zera came up to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkeche Rebbe Asi. No, it's okay. Ashkeche Rebbe Asi. And the Yosef Ka'amar Le Lahashmai. So he saw he was talking about this sugya of how Reb Chizda presented and how Reb Chizda answered that really holds like the Rabbanon. And by Reb Chia he answered, no, really it was a stillborn. And says the Gemara, Amar Le, what did Reb Asi say back to Reb Chizda? Yeyasher, Givaldik Svara, you did a good job. Amar Rav Yochanan said the same thing. Now if Rav Yochanan says the same thing, says the Gemara, Michlal, that implies de Palig Ale Reb Shimon ben Lakish. If Rav Yochanan said this, then it must be against Reb Shimon ben Lakish. So says the Gemara, what would Rav Asi say about that? This is fascinating. Take a look at a gorgeous Rashi of respect. The Rashi says over here, Dibra Maschil, Mishha have a shahile, a quarter of the way down in the Rashis. Minhagul shal Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish made himself a minhag. Kshe'omer Reb Yochanan shmua she'enu modelo. When Reish Lakish would hear a vort, he'd hear a dvar Torah psak halacha from Reb Yochanan, a memra that he didn't agree with. Shaha Reish Lakish shah ostayim kodem sheyachlok alav ulai yachzor bo. It's an unbelievable thing. Maybe he'll change his mind. Reish Lakish is like, but in the Beis Medrash, he heard Rav Yochanan zip the lip. They were patient. They were very, very patient. We're very quick. We're like, I disagree with you. You disagree with me. But the midah of Reish Lakish to just stop and listen and think and wait is an unbelievable midah. Something that our door doesn't know much from. So that's what the Gemara says. So says the Gemara, Rav Asi says, I don't know the answer to your question because when Rav Yochanan's shita was mentioned in the Gemara, I left the Beis Medrash while Reish Lakish was in his processing period. And I didn't hear the answer. And Vishasikle, he was quiet then. So I just don't know. And then continuing, V'ika de Amre, that Mishta Habashasi Vishasikle. So says the Gemara, that what was happening over here, Rashi, Mishta Habashasi, Shose Mayim Haya, Ksha'amar of Yochanan, Uvisoch Kach, Yotze Rebasi. He's drinking like a camel. He pounded like 24 hours. I don't know what he was doing. How much water could he drink? I have a cup in front of me. It's a 12-ounce cup. Put the cup down and argue. The Gemara says that Rav Yochanan said his shita. Reish Lakish was in the middle of a drink of water. During that time, Rav Asi popped out. And because of that, he didn't know the answer. So I know we're a little bit in a funny spot here because I really did want to get more to the bottom. We will not have time to do justice in the next 5 minutes. I'd rather stop here. It is somewhat fast moving, but we'll end up being stuck in the middle. So we're going to stop right here and we're going to pick up tomorrow night with Reb Shimon Shizuri and wishing you all a beautiful night.